Alex, how's it going, man?
What's up, Ram? Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing amazing. Thanks so much for joining on Dads with Mike's. I've been talking to you for a while, so I'm really stoked to have you on the show today.
Yes, I am excited to be here, man. I remember I've been watching you in the podcast. I mean, for yeah, it's been a good chunk of time now. So, glad that we were able to make this happen.
Yeah, thanks, man. So just to get us started, let us know a little bit about yourself.
Man, my name is Alex. I have three kids. Ages, and my oldest about to be 9 years old. That's crazy. I don't know where time goes. My daughter just turned 6, and my youngest is 4. Been married for 11 years. I live in the suburbs of Houston, born and raised here in Texas. Yeah, man, and I mean those things right there keep me pretty busy. So that's my life.
Okay, how long you been married for?
11 years.
11 years. Okay. Do you consider that long, or does that make you an experienced husband, or I don't know what the number is.
Man, I so this is what I think about. When my wife and I got married and bought our house, her parents gave us a tree. And it was this little crepe myrtle that was, real scraggly and kind of small. And and my wife and I were like, "Oh, let's go get a few more and we're gonna make a little row in the backyard along the fence. It'll look great." And my mother-in-law, she said to me, "Hey, I know they look small now. Just give it 10 years and it'll be amazing how filled out and grown these trees are." And I mean, I was like 23, 24 then,
Oh,
out of college, first big kid job, our first house, just got married, and I was like, 10 years, like I'm gonna wait 10 years for this tree to grow, like that's that's crazy, right? And here we are, man. 10 plus years later, and now we have four giant trees in our backyard. Since then, we've added three kids to this family, and so I don't know if 11 years makes me experienced and professional at it yet, but it is fun to think about the fact that there's something to be said for things that take time, and there's no shortcuts to time, right? I mean, you either cover those years or you don't, and there's no shortcut to say, hey, you know what? Next year I'm going to decide to have been married for 15 years. Like you don't just get to decide that. You have to put in the time and the effort to get those years under your belt. So
that's an interesting gift, though. A tree. I've never heard of a marriage gift like that before. And the fact that you're talking about it now, that left a mark.
oh yeah. Oh, we had a little thing with trees, man. We actually planted a tree at our wedding. We actually bought a little lemon tree, and we bought a special planter, and we did a jar of dirt from the home I grew up in, a jar of dirt from the home my wife grew up in, and then we got one jar of water from the place we got married. And so, the tree was basically planted already when we, to take to the ceremony. But then we both poured the soil in, we poured the water in from the place, and that tree's still going too. That we got about four or five lemons from it this year. I made a
Wow.
little bit of lemonade last week. So yeah, I don't know, man. That's kind of a funny. It's funny that you bring that up. I hadn't really thought about it. Yeah, we had a little bit of a thing with trees in the beginning of our marriage with
Okay,
the
so
tree
that's your
we
thing
planted.
then.
Yeah, the trees in the backyard, and so yeah, it's kind of cool.
Something else that stands out with you, and look, every time I think about you, look, you're one of the most enthusiastic guys I've ever met. I'll let you know right now. Okay. But also the gas fill up, the
Sunday fill
weekly
up.
Sunday fill up. Tell us about that. Well, what's the story behind that?
I there was a turning point for me where I realized that I needed to figure out how to be a little bit more intentional in my home, in my marriage, and my parenting. And I thought about, okay, well, where do I already show up with intentionality? And I would look at my job, and it's like, well, having spent most of my career in sales, anybody that's in sales, that you go in every day, you look at your leads, you look at your open calls, you look at deals you can close, you do your follow ups, like you're always chasing and pursuing these things that you want to get done, right? If your goal is a closed deal, you chase it. And so I
Yeah.
said, okay, if I want a happy and successful marriage, how do I do that? Well, I got to chase after it. And so to chase it is to be intentional about it. And so I started thinking about, okay, well, what are the things I can do to serve my wife? What are the things I can do to bring myself into this relationship with just a pure act of service, right? Without expectation, without needing anything in return. And that was one of the things I came up with was like, well, that's something that has to be done every week consistently. And so how about I just get a little intentional about it and take care of it? And so yeah, every Sunday, I usually, find a time either after church, or I actually have an alarm set on my phone still to
You
this
have an
day that goes
alarm
off.
for it?
It goes off
No.
at 9 p.m. Sunday night. My alarm goes off and says, "Go get gas." And so that's kind of the time I figure if I've been busy day, crazy day, somehow forgot. That's kind of that last minute reminder before bedtime. Go get this thing done. Now I don't really need it. I usually get it done during the day anyway. But yeah, it still goes off every Sunday night, 9 p.m. Um, but yeah, man, it's just a way to be intentional about being of service and just one thing I can do because it has to be done, right? And if I don't do it, my wife's got to figure out how to do it with three kids in tow, likely, right, on the way to
Right.
school, or while she's running around to get groceries or doing errands, whatever it is. Just got one more thing to worry about. So how can I take that off the table and just have it be done? So yeah, that's how Sunday Philip was born.
Okay. Do you think things like that make a major difference in the marriage, or is that just something like a bonus? Is that gonna make your wife say, "Yeah, my husband's a good one," and brag to her friends about you? Or now it's just gotten to the point, well, yeah, okay, he fills up my gas tank. Yeah, he's been doing that for months now. And also he takes out the trash. So what? Is that enough?
I don't. So there's kind of two questions there you're asking. One is what you're doing enough, and two is, are you getting recognition for it? And the first part is it enough? I don't know if it's enough, but I think the reality of marriage, especially the reality of life in general, but if we're talking specifically about your marriage, it's that it's really built on the everyday mundane actions, right?
Okay.
It's kind of the idea, if you want to tell your wife you love her, do you wait for the, once a year vacation to, go off for a few days and be like, hey, just want to remind you that I love you? Like, is that as impactful to, wait, once every year? Or do you wake up every morning and say, hey, I love you. Hope you have a great day, right? Like, one feels more grandiose. It's more epic, more planned. It's this big gesture. Let's go do this big. Let's take off for a week to the beach and drink margaritas, and we're going to remind each other how much we love each other. But what about the every day, right? So what are you doing
Yeah.
day in and day out? And so that's where, is it enough? I don't know if it's enough, man. I mean, but that's all you can do, right? All you
Ask
can
your
do is
wife.
well, and then that kind of goes to the second part, right? Um, One, yes, it's very important to know like what's important to your wife. Are you listening to her? Are you taking into account what she's saying and asking for without being dismissive or being defensive? Are the two big ones. But that last piece of like the gratitude and recognition, they don't matter, right? Like, does she brag to her friends about me? I don't. I've never thought about that, man. I mean, like, I doubt it. I'm not that impressive, right? Like, you know,
Come on, man.
um, does she come longing with thank yous and well wishes? Like, no, I mean, does she say thank you? Of course, but like, does she say it every single time? Does she say it right away? Does it happen within 4 minutes? I don't. It doesn't matter, Like,
Right.
I don't keep score in that sense of what the give back is. I just keep score of what are the things that I'm doing to show up.
Okay. Got it. Because a lot of guys will think, well, I do a lot of things around the house. I work, I mow the lawn, I take care of things when they break. And they think, well, that should be enough. But it's more than that, right? But I think it also depends on the love language. What's your wife's love language? Does she appreciate those little gestures, or is she more of a flowers and restaurant type of gal? Like you got to know your wife,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, you got to know her. My wife is an acts of service person. She likes to have things be done.
Okay.
She doesn't like the to-do list to get super long with all these tasks and projects. She likes things to be able to be maintained and be updated and be worked on. But also there's just a reality of the seasons of life, right? Like, whether or not somebody's love language doesn't really change the fact that like dishes need to be done every day and laundry's got to be done
Yeah.
regularly, right? And kids need to be taken to school and kids have not like those things just are like whatever your love language is, there's just still tasks that have to be done in a home.
Yeah.
And so at what point are you being aware and intentional and looking for things that need to get done, or are you just kind of like, oh well, I'm sure it'll get handled, right? Like,
That's something that I wanted to get your thoughts on actually, because that's sort of a debate online these days is about whether or not men should take the initiative and go ahead and just do the weekly chores that there are to do at the house, or wait for their wives to tell them what to do. Now, I understand both sides of the fence. Obviously, some guys will say, "Well, look, she just has, she can just tell me what there is to do, and I'll do it. The fact that I'll do it is should be enough." And then the wives will say, "Well, no, well, he should already know what to do. He lives in this house, doesn't he? He knows there's laundry, groceries, cleaning, and cooking. Why do I have to tell him what there is to do? He should know already what to do and go ahead and do it without asking me." Which side are you on?
Oh, dude, I think you already know what side of that what side of that I fall on. Is this your mom or your wife? You looking for your mom to tell you what to clean up your room? She's not your mom, right? She's not your mom. Like this isn't this isn't her house and her roles to delegate out. This is, I mean, especially as a man, like this is your home. If you
Yeah.
take the role of leader, provider, protector, all these things, like everything here falls under your realm, right? This is your kingdom, and so there's no job that's too big or too small. Things have to get done, and so that's, I mean, that's where I fall on it, man. I think the idea of like, oh, well, just go ahead and give me a list, and then I'll get it done. Like, dude, use your eyeballs. Like, look around. Just like literally walk into a room and be like, huh, what needs to be done in this room right now? What can I do?
Yeah, but the argument is that some guys will say, "Well, that's just how men are. I don't think about these things. But again, just let me know, and I'm there. I'll help you. I
Mm-hmm.
just need to know, what do you want me to do this week?"
Yeah, it's excuses.
Excuse me.
Imagine walking up to your boss and being like, "Hey, man, I mean, I haven't really done anything in the last week. Like, you didn't tell me what to do, so I have to kind of sit around waiting on you." Like, you would never do that.
No, no, that's true.
It'd be, I mean, and if you take that conversation to your buddies, you'd be laughed at. Be like, "Dude, you can't just sit around and wait for your boss. Like, you sit around doing nothing for a week, waiting on your boss to tell you what you do. That's ridiculous, right? Like, you know what your role is. You know what your company does. You know what tasks you
Yeah,
do, like go get them done. Yet we come home and all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, she didn't tell me nothing." Right? Like it's the same,
I
man. It's
hear
the
you.
same. How
Yeah,
you do one thing is how you do everything, right? And I think we do have. I think that the idea, right, that well, that's how men are, and men and women are different. Is that it's true. We are different, and I'm willing to let a sink full of dishes sit for a lot longer than my wife is because I'd rather sit on the couch and relax after a long day. But the difference then becomes right, like that's almost like the idea between like a boy and a man. A man does what needs to be done, not what he wants to do. And so
yeah,
that's one of those things that just needs to be done. And so it'd be great to fall back on the idea of like, well, I'm just wired differently. I just don't see these things. Oh, it doesn't bother me. Like, yeah, cool stuff, man. But like, where do you pick up a little intentionality and get after it?
yeah. And look, to your point, I think from what I hear from women, they would prefer their husbands to take initiative, take care of things, be the man, lead the house. Not have to have another kid
Right,
to take care of. She married a man, she wants a man, not another kid to take care of.
right,
So if I'm
exactly.
hearing them right, then they want that. They're craving it. So
They Yeah, I think kind of a common element is that you're going to hear a lot of those complaints. They essentially are boiling down to I want to be heard and seen.
yes, that's huge. The
It,
herd
it
herd
it's
part.
Yeah, and it's the same thing men want. Men just are looking for it in a different way, right? Men are usually looking for, the appreciation, the recognition, like, hey, like thank you for all the things you do for us, but thank you for all these things you've done, or all, thanks for going to, like, they're looking for recognition in a sense. I mean, we're talking generalities, right? Everybody's a little bit different, but
Sure.
that's kind of where I think most of the men that I know tend to fall. It's like, well, what, I want to be appreciated, and women really usually want the same thing. It
Yeah.
just looks a little bit different, right? If I'm the default parent, right, which most moms kind of end up being that default parent, if I'm the default parent, like I have all these things to do. I just want to be seen. I want to be heard. I want you to know that I have this big plate of things to do, and I just want a little bit of help getting them done.
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree 100%. But what do you think that men are struggling with the most? Is it that what you just mentioned? Is it the listening, or is it contributing around the house? What's making it so that it seems like a lot of men are struggling in their marriage? I don't understand. Is it from one side you're hearing all this stuff about women complaining about their husbands? Like he's playing video games. He's sitting on the couch with a beer watching the game. He's not there. He's there physically, but he's not there mentally. He's not present. Or is it, I talk to my husband, he doesn't seem to be listening to me, he's on his phone. Or is it all of the above? I guess. Who knows, man?
That's right. It's everything. I would say if I was like, you got to pick out, you got to point to something. I would point out to two things. One is communication skills, communication preferences, just the active communication. There's usually a breakdown there, and then also the second one would be defensiveness. Kind of more of a you versus me instead of us versus everything
Yeah.
else. And those two, they also play very much into each other. So like, I mean, I'll tell you, being a story very personal for my own life, right? So my wife's like, hey, we got a lot of dishes. There's so many dishes to do, so much laundry to do. There's so much this to do, and man, based on not hearing it, I'm like, oh yeah, huh. Well, let's just take a break. Like, just come sit on the couch with me. Let's just like relax, right? So that points directly to the communication. It's like the way she's talking and the way I'm talking they're different. And
Right.
so I'm like, in my head, I'm like, she's not asking for anything. She's just telling me she's tired and there's too much to do. And so like, hey, let's just take a break and we'll deal with it later, right? So there's a communication breakdown a lot of times there. And then the second part is, so when she's not being heard and that communication changes to, hey, like, can you help me with this thing? Hey, can you do a little bit more of this? Hey, can you? Then the reaction is to get defensive, and that was my initial reaction. That was what I started with. Is like very defensive. It's like, hey, like, do you not understand like how much I'm already doing? Like, do you not know that I'm tired? Like, right, it's very defensive. It's like basically you're attacking me. Like, oh, so sorry I didn't get that done already, right? So, um, we'll say like that's the before. That's where I was, and
Okay.
so now when you kind of look at those two areas of communication and the defensiveness, so now if there's a complaint brought against me, hey, I asked you to do this thing, or you said you were going to do this thing and you didn't, or this is taking longer than you said it would, or whatever, right? There's a complaint. The initial reaction, the default is to get defensive. So now it's like instead of getting defensive, it's just like, okay, basically we're calling out a problem. It's not we're not assigning blame. We're just calling out a problem. There's this problem in front of us. So instead of looking at it as blame being placed on me, I look at things as a problem to be solved. Right. So now it's
Yeah.
like, okay, well, how do we solve this together? How do we be on one team and solve this problem together? And then also the communication, just understanding that we communicate differently. So how do we prevent arguments in a sense by knowing that, okay, what is she trying to say? Or like, I hear what she said. What does she mean? Like, what is really going on here? Right. Like, what's the what's the underlying problem that we can go solve? That I mean, I look at a lot of life. I mean, life, parenting, marriage, all like, what's the problem to be solved? And
Instead of finger pointing, instead of getting defensive, all those games.
right, because if somebody else wants to point blame, even if it's at me, that's their decision. It's not. I don't have to take that weight. I can choose how I look at the world and look at my life, and I look at it as, well, what's the problem to be solved? Is it mine to solve, or is it somebody else's to solve? Can I solve? Right? Like, how do I approach this? And if it's for me to solve and I can solve it, then I take it and I fix it. If it's not, then I let it go. It's not me. It just is. Right? It's a problem that exists that just is out there.
Is that something you do on a daily basis? Something comes up
Yeah,
with your wife, you're like, okay, hold on a second. What's the problem here?
yeah,
Can I solve it?
yeah. I mean, especially with, right. Then you factor in kids. Man, you got kids. Like, do I do it daily? I mean, I do it like by the minute. Some days it feels like, right. Then
Yeah.
you get to like, um, hey, it's time to clean up our rooms. Oh, I don't want to. I want to do it. Like, right, everybody's yelling and screaming. It's like, okay, like you could get very defensive and be like, hey, how dare you disrespect me, right? How dare
Yeah.
you not listen to me? How dare you do this thing? But like, what's the problem, right? Like maybe the kid's tired, maybe they're hungry, maybe it's late, maybe it's early, right? Like what's the problem? Maybe they really just don't want to do it. So then how do you make it fun? What's the problem to solve and how do we solve it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great advice, man. And but I don't think we're there yet, though. I think that's another thing is men don't seem to realize that they're part of the problem.
Oh yeah, dude, we're dumb. Absolutely, yeah. How do we make it this far? I have no idea. There's so many of us. It's a law of numbers. I have no idea.
Well, look, you tell me. You have a successful marriage, 11 years. What's been the secret all this time?
I mean, I'll tell you, man. Those two things have been, if we factor in those three things, I guess, right? Being intentional, being proactive, right? Instead of like sitting on my butt and waiting for somebody to tell me what to do. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, what's the thing that I can go out of my way to do? The Sunday Phillips a great example of that. Yeah, it's small, man. It takes not a lot of time. I mean, like, there's not this huge value tied to it. It's just about being intentional and finding things that you can do in and day out, right? So intentionality, communication, like being aware that we speak differently. That's the reality. I was just talking to a friend of mine a few weeks ago, and he's like, "Man, like we're always getting into it, man. We're always arguing." I'm like, "Give me an example." He's like, "Well, we go on a date night, and I can just tell she's not having a good time." And I'm like, "Okay, like, so like, what do you do?" He's like, "Well, ask her why aren't you having a good time." I was like, "Well, how's that work?" So we end up arguing because if she says she is having a good time, I'm like, "Oh, I can tell you're not having a good time." I'm like, "Okay, how about? I mean, can I give you an idea?" He's like, "Yeah, what's your idea?" I was like, "How about next time you do something different, right?" Like, like it's that communication. It's that
Yeah.
communication misalignment, right? He thinks there's this problem, so he's pointing it out. She doesn't think there's a problem, so she's pointing it out. Now they're arguing when a second ago they were just fine,
On
right?
the
And
bright
so
side, at least they're dating each other. That's
yeah,
great. That's
right.
something else that but it's funny. We're laughing, but a lot of couples are not dating each other after having kids.
Oh, absolutely, man. Well, they don't have kids yet, so they got that. They get us beat there with time.
Oh, okay. That explains
Um,
it.
but yeah, man, that explains it.
Well,
But that idea, right, of you know, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you keep getting
yeah.
a result you don't like. How about next time you do something different, right? So if you keep telling your wife, "Hey, it looks like you're having a bad time. We don't look very happy," and every time you say that, she gets
It
mad at
triggers
you, and
her.
you guys are fighting. Hey, how about you don't say that next time, right? Like, what's really going on? And then that's when you dive into it. What's really going on? Well, I want to make sure it's a good time, and so I'm worried that she's not. So I'm trying to make sure she is. It's like, well, you weren't really making sure she was. You were asking her why she isn't.
Yeah.
Right. So like what can you say
It,
differently next
it's
time? What can
starting
you
off negative.
Right. And so that's the communication thing, man. You gotta fix communication. You gotta figure out like what
Well,
is
what would
what
you do in that situation? Would you ask her, what do you want to do? Or would you just take the initiative and say, okay, next week, let's do this? Because a lot of women like that, right? It's attractive. It's attractive when the man takes charge and says,
Yeah.
all right, Friday, 8 o'clock, dress nice, we're going out, and we're going to this place. As opposed to, well, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do?
Right. That's exhausting. Oh, what do you want to do for dinner? I don't know. What do you want to do for dinner? I don't know. What do you want? That's exhausting, right? So to answer your question, what would I do? First of all, in that situation, I wouldn't be saying anything. We're on a date night, we're at the movies, we're out to dinner, we're out to walk in the park, whatever we're doing,
Yeah.
unless a problem is being voiced to me, I'm not gonna make one up. Right? Like that's first of all. I'm not going out of my way to make up problems, right? There is the reality. Like, if I know my wife well enough, and I can tell she's not feeling well or something's bothering her. Like, I'm gonna ask, "Hey, you feeling okay?" Like, "Hey, you didn't eat your dinner. Like, did you not like right?" Like, I can ask questions, but I'm not gonna go out of my way to be like, "Hey, what's your deal? Like, what's wrong with you?" Right? Not doing that one. And then second of all, yes, that's when you have to go out of your way to figure out like what's the thing my wife likes to do? What's that thing she mentioned? Oh, she mentioned there's a pottery studio in town that she wants to go take a class at. She wants to go to one of those paint nights. Like, pay attention and then plan that out and make it happen, right? Like, hey, Friday night we're gonna go painting. I got a babysitter lined up, right? I figure we get dinner here. I pick a place, right? You know what your wife likes to eat, man. Just pick one and just
Yeah.
go. Like, it'll be fine. And then go do the thing, because yeah, man, it's just so much time spent on the the I don't knows or the what ifs or like, yeah, man, nobody wants to spend their time doing that, you know. And so, like, this is kind of random, maybe it's related. Like, I keep a note in my phone. I have an Apple Note in my phone, and when I think of things, when I notice things, I write them down. So I have a list of things my wife said that she would like as gifts one day, or like things that she's been looking at, or whatever, things that she wants to go do, things she wants to go see. I just keep a note and I keep filling it out. So when anniversaries come up or birthdays or Christmas, whatever, I'm like, oh, hey, look, she said she wanted this thing, or, whatever it was that I can get gift ideas from. It's like, hey, let's do something. Like, oh, my wife said she wanted to go camping. Oh, she said she wanted to go visit this place. So she wanted to, like, here's my ideas, right? I think that so often those moments are just kind of let go. And you think that, oh, well, when I need an idea, I'll come up with one. But all the ideas that were given and that we come across, we let be gone, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, man. Alex, I got a question for you. Give me your top 3 things that men should do to make their wives want them more.
Top 3 things men should do to make their wives want them more.
Yeah, don't
Man,
think about it too much.
no, I'm just
Just
gonna start
go.
talking. First, I would say pursue your wife. I think that's the probably the top thing you can
Yeah,
do.
it's a good
And
one.
there's gonna be little nuances. What does that mean? Well, that's for you. Like I mean, you chased your wife down once, go chase her down again. Like you got her to marry you. Go do the things you did the first time. Just keep doing them. Never stop doing the things that worked the first time. If it worked, double down. So yeah, pursue your wife. Listen, like really listen. I think that one thing that guys tend to do a lot of is try to solve problems. And so when our wives start talking, our little brain starts going like, "Oh yeah, well, I would just do this thing. I would just say that. I would go call so and so. Like we're gonna solve her problem." You should just listen, and just listen, give space, like just
Yeah,
give that ability to connect. Um, and then number 3, what can you do, man? I would just not just. I would say the third thing you could really do is be intentional. And I know that's kind of cliche. It's like, oh yeah, just be intentional, but really, like, not not the idea of intentionality. Like, really, like, look at your life and say, where's the places I could be showing up better? And now, I mean, there is a question that could be asked there, right? You can literally look at this person and say, hey, what can I do to be showing up better for you? And take that into account. Like, what's the things that are brought up? What are the things that you see? And what are the things that you can start chasing after? I mean, essentially the same way you would be chasing a promotion at work. Like, chase that at home too. Like if you understand how things work and what things are important and not important, like make your own little list of to dos you can come up with of like, hey, I'm gonna go after these things. So yeah, pursue your wife, listen, be intentional.
that's great advice, man. Last question. What's the best thing about your marriage?
Man, all of it. I mean, I love life, man, and I didn't always. It wasn't always this way, and that's a big disclaimer I want to put out there, right? I was all these things I'm talking about. Oh yeah, guys, this, guys, that. They're really I'm just talking about myself. Talking about myself, 8 years ago or whatever, 10 years ago when we were getting started, and where my wife would come home and be like, oh, so and Janet said this at work, and Susan did this. I'm like, oh yeah, just put this in an email and send it off, and don't like just kind of bypassing the relationship, the connection to the solutions, right? I was doing that, right? Like we have kids, and my wife's like, "Oh, there's so much to do," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I know, there's so much to do. Let's just sit down and not do any of it, right?" Like, who's gonna do it though? It's gonna be her. She's doing it tomorrow, right? So,
Yeah.
all those things, like kind of just the complacency around, like, well, yeah, I'm sure we'll get around to doing a trip and we'll have fun and we'll reconnect, in 6 months or a year, whatever. We'll figure it out. Like that was me. I was doing all those things, and so that's when I'm talking about this. Is like that's what I was doing. So what I love, man, all of it, man. I love being in a position to look at life essentially from a growth mindset, right? We talk about that a lot in like business world, and as honestly, man, I would say not honestly, everything's been honest. I would say that men could greatly benefit from because this is what I've benefited from applying a lot of the principles that we take to work with us, applying those principles at home, right? When
Okay.
we show up at work to do our jobs, to perform, to be a good team player, to look at the next thing that needs to be done, to be proactive. We do all these things instinctively, learned whatever at work. Like just do those at home. And so I love that. I love looking at my life and thinking, what can I do today? What can I do tomorrow? What can I do in the next week? Like, what are the things? Where are the places I can show up? And not for the recognition, right? It's not for the thank you. It's not for the grat. It's leadership through service, not because I want to get something back for it, but because that's my role. That's my responsibility is to show up and serve my family.
That's beautiful, man. Well put. Alex, tell the people, what are you working on? Where can they find you?
What am I working on, man? I'm working on making this the best life I could possibly live. I mean, I post online on Twitter, at the Alex Barrera on Twitter, TheAlexBarrera. Right now, I'm working actually putting some notes together on a marriage coaching program for dads. I think that as we get into fatherhood, there can be a lot of things about life that become very overwhelming, can become very heavy. And we built a society that has everybody very focused on production and very isolated and alone. And so there's a lot of room for improvement and growth there. And so I'm putting some things together for dads that we can, man, make the best of this. We only get one shot at it, you know? We get one shot at this whole game.
That's
So let's
right.
make the most of it.
Dude, thank you so much for joining me on Dads with Mikes. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Rem. It's been a pleasure.